try this very high-tech setup. This is my first dialogue cafe, so very exciting. But my journey with social entrepreneurship and the university work started actually when I was a student at Stanford University in California. And I learned about social entrepreneurship my first week there, and saw a social entrepreneur speak at a lecture series for students, and was completely blown away. And something about the way they talked about how they thought about problems, how they thought about solutions, how they overcame the many, many, many challenges, and how they found meaning and mission in their work, and how they created an impact just resonated with me. And so that started a dozen-year-long process for me to get to where we are now. But what it allowed me to do was understand from the perspective of a student, how can you think about integrating this idea of being a socially entrepreneurial person in your life and integrate that into your academic experience. And so we got to experiment with lots of different student activities, business plan competitions for social change, different ways to build networks and learning communities, and build bridges across the graduates and undergraduates, across the different disciplines at the university, and build community partnerships with local networks of social entrepreneurs. But fast forward several years, I've been in Ashoka nearly a decade, and when I actually interned at Ashoka 10 years ago when I was a student, and what my summer project was to do research on the trend and mapping of where were social entrepreneurship programs at universities, primarily in the United States at the time, and who were the leaders in that space, and what kind of courses were being taught, where were they being taught. And so if you think about 2001, doing this research, there were basically 20 universities in the United States teaching at least one course in social entrepreneurship. 95% of them were in a business school. One was in a public policy school, one was in an undergraduate program, but really it was very few and far between, very sparse. There was no concept at that time of doing anything more than one course for business students, or doing anything that ingrained or incorporated into a campus-wide initiative or culture or broader curriculum kind of structure. And so, if you think of where we are now, it's incredibly exciting. And it makes me think about something that Bill Drayton, the founder of Ashoka, talked about all the time, that the role of a social entrepreneur and the role of Ashoka to see and understand when you're in a historical moment and help bring the world into the future. And so when I think about what we're trying to do with Ashoka U, I personally see that there is a historical moment happening in higher education because there's many different changing factors in the broader environment. Students are demanding different kinds of skill sets and learning opportunities. Employers are also demanding different kinds of skill sets and profiles of graduating students. And at the same time, there's an opportunity for universities to stay relevant, be more integrated, differentiate themselves strategically amongst all universities, and really think about the impact that you're having on your students, on your community, and I would say not just on your community outside the walls of the campus, but also the community inside the walls of the campus. So really exciting to see this community that's actually being formed across the university leadership, faculty, and administrators here. So right now we have 24 Changemaker campuses in 5 countries. And as Rob mentioned, the University of Northampton is the first in the UK, actually in Europe. We started in the United States, and what we were trying to do was to demonstrate that compared to the research that had been done 10 years ago, where there really weren't any campus-wide initiatives, what we wanted to prove was that social innovation and change-making did not belong only in a business school. We actually want to see innovation, interdisciplinary learning, undergraduate, not just graduate students, and really a campus-wide culture of innovation and social impact. And so the Changemaker campus selection process, which was based on and modified from the Ashoka Fellow selection process, is a very rigorous, multi-step, multi-hour, multi-month kind of process. And what we're ultimately looking for is a university or a college that is uniquely pioneering new models, that has an amazing team of faculty and students and staff see themselves as innovators within the university, and that ultimately there's enough of a coalescing team of people within the university that you can integrate your strategy so that you don't just have one class here, one class there, one student activity here, one student activity there, and that really it's a multiplier effect and a very strategic, integrated vision for the university. So then what HOPU does after the selection process is we like to bring together opportunities for some of the leadership across the Changemaker campuses to learn and share from each other. And actually, just a week ago, we had Tim talking about all of the ideas that are evolving for the Changemaker Week that's happening at the University of Northampton, and he was sharing some of those best practices and what's going on other campuses in the Ashoka network. So already we use the University of Northampton as a best practice for many of the different things that you're doing. And then, in addition to that, we recently started a PR network. So we are working with professionals, Changemaker campuses, so that we can best tell stories through media, tell stories through social media, tell stories of the amazing change making that's happening on your campus and off your campus, because, you know, to the point that Rob made, we're really trying to build a global movement. And the core of that movement is the Changemaker campuses that are doing the work, that are being the entrepreneurs in their own university and creating new models. But then what we want to do is pull together all of those different learnings and insights and tell the stories so that we're amplifying the work that you're doing, and we're basically holding you up as an incredible example of what's possible. And so we also call the Ashoka Exchange, which is the largest global convening for social entrepreneurship education. And this coming September in 2014, it will be hosted at Brown University, which is one of our Changemaker campuses, found in Providence, Rhode Island. And we'll be bringing together 150 colleges and universities from around the world. And much of what we'll be doing is highlight what Changemaker campuses are doing, so that we'll be talking up the University of Northampton to many other universities around the world.
I was meeting with the president of Arizona State University just earlier this week with Rob, Michael Crow, and he was explaining how their university has gone from 35,000 students to 75,000 students as a Changemaker campus. Can you tell us a bit about that? And also, I'm very interested in Tulane University and how they've changed their business model.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so at Changemaker campuses, what we look for is innovation, quality, and diversity. And so as we're building this network that have all gone through an extremely rigorous selection process to show that they're really the leading universities and colleges around the world in social entrepreneurship, we have a really good set of examples that are very different. So Arizona State University is actually the largest university in the United States at this time. It's over 70,000 students, which is split over 4 physical campuses within 2 cities in Arizona. And over the last 10 years, there's been a huge transformation. So as Tim mentioned, Michael Crow, who's the president, he more than doubled in size student population, built all these buildings. But for me, what was most important was the 2 things he did. The first was he created his design principles for the university. And there are 10 principles. The top the top few include entrepreneurship in every aspect of the university. So, in every academic and kind of student leadership program, there's some aspect that is encouraging students to be creative and entrepreneurial. And then another aspect is what they call social embeddedness. And so the way they define that is that the campus has to be embedded in the community, and the community has to be embedded in the campus, and it has to be relevant in a broader social context. And so when you actually think of, and there's 8 other principles, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, those are the most relevant. But that it was very clearly articulated in the very beginning of Michael Crow's presidency that he wanted to build an institution that was really built on a whole set of principles. And then the second thing he did, in addition to building an institution that aligned with these principles, was that he had observed that while the university is built primarily in disciplines and silos and departments, the world does not always operate that way. So what he really pioneered, and I haven't really seen any other institution who's done this, he restructured the entire university so that every single program is interdisciplinary. And everything is focused on relevant the outside world. And so it, you're still learning all the same discipline, but the context in which you're learning it is really focused on real world implication and this cross-disciplinary perspective. And so, in this whole restructuring process, not one faculty person, was fired, but the restructuring allowed new innovations, allowed new ideas, new perspectives, new combinations of students and applications in the real world to come out. And so that's just one example of how having both a visionary university president, but really an institution-wide approach. And Arizona State University also, because it's so large, but even beyond that, they measure their success not by the number or percentage of students they reject, but by the percentage of students they accept. They want their brand to be built around inclusivity and particularly marginalized communities that can afford the tuition at Arizona State University, and not by exclusivity, which, some campuses build their brand around having, almost 0% can get in. And so they're really trying to build a mind shift that higher education, high quality higher education, should be an opportunity everyone can have. And they're trying to build an institution that makes that appropriate, relevant, and building a real pathway for useful skills and useful perspectives, so that when the students graduate into the real world, they actually see all the connections. Meanwhile, Tulane also had a very visionary university president, President Scott Cowan. But some of the context for how Tulane became on the path to being a Changemaker campus was a little bit tragic. It was Hurricane Katrina just 7 years ago that completely washed the school away and ruined many of the buildings. It took over a year to rebuild and bring the students back on campus. All the students had to go to other universities for a year. And when the rebuilding happened, it was a moment of opportunity. And President Cowan took this moment of opportunity to say, Tulane is rebuilt, we're, reborn, but New Orleans still has a lot of work that needs to be done. And what we want to commit to is that any student who comes to Tulane sees that it is their role and responsibility to be part of the solution of rebuilding and continuing to reinvigorate New Orleans. So the whole foundation of community development, community integration, and social responsibility was built. And what President Cowan did that first year back is that he made, in the United States, the first required, mandated, all first-year students at Tulane must do a certain number of community service hours in New Orleans. They also created a very robust public service center that started very quickly training faculty across the entire university to integrate service learning into all these different disciplines, courses, and programs. So over the first 4 years, by 4 years in, every single student who was at Tulane at that time had intensive, immersive work experience in the New Orleans community, seeing the biggest problems, working with the most underserved areas, and seeing themselves as a responsible citizen doing something about it. But what they realized was missing was how to go a step beyond. What they were immersed in was understanding the problems and building respect and relationships with the communities, but they didn't necessarily have a lens to think about solutions. So that's where they brought in social innovation. And over the last 4 years or so, they now have a campus-wide minor that's an interdisciplinary minor in social innovation. They also have a whole suite of funding opportunities for students who can get funded to work in New Orleans and do community projects. They have very robust support for faculty across almost all the different schools to get research funding to understand social entrepreneurship in the context of their discipline. And so there's been this huge upsurge of energy and momentum from students, from faculty, from the president, from deans of all the different schools. And what it's been building on is the opportunity, the tragic opportunity that was created by Hurricane Katrina, but then the new identity that was formed around Tulane as a catalyzer of agents of change and a catalyzer of caring, empathic students who are embedded in the community and solutions for the community. And then social innovation comes in as the skill set, the mindset, and the way of thinking and the way of acting that allows the student to go on and work collaboratively with partners or starting their own social ventures. And there's actually quite a high track record of students staying in New Orleans after graduation to continue building the community and building the social innovation